Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to the Best Boss Hive podcast, our special edition series where I work with six amazing executive and leadership coaches where we come together to address the problems in the world today, what's going on, what leaders need to do, and the best ways of leading ourselves and our communities so that we are most successful. So welcome, 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 everyone. Our topic today is around stress, understanding we're at enormous heights of stress these days in the world as it's changing. And now is the best time to really start to think about how can we manage and understand stress, not only for ourselves as leaders, but also for our people. So before we get started, it's my pleasure to introduce my six wonderful Hive coaches, and we're just going to go around the room and quickly introduce ourselves. So I'll start with myself, Danny Ceballos with Unleash Consulting. I work with managers and leaders across sectors and organizations to be the best bosses possible. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Donnie.
Hi, everyone. Hi, listeners. I'm Donnie Landefeld, and I serve high-performing and high-potential senior leaders and their teams to amplify their performance and well-being, leaning into different experiences, including time spent in the boardroom and also on stage as a classically trained musician.
Awesome.
I'll
Sveta.
jump in. My name is Svetlana Parilova. I work with fintechs and banks, help them build strong teams and effective leaders who can deliver results amid the constant change that we experience.
Excellent. And Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Finnis. I'm with Game Changer Coaching, and I help leaders reach their goals and become their best selves in life, in business, and in sports.
Excellent. Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Jean. I'm a conscious leadership coach for women in midlife, helping them live their best life by noticing their reactivity and moving into creativity.
Taryn.
Yeah, and I partner with Cynthia, and I'm Taryn Loxo, and I also work with those high-achieving women who want to live their best life through midlife by reducing stress and helping them hop off that hustle hamster wheel.
Wonderful. And Kathleen.
Okay, Kathleen Fanning's my name, and I'm based in Ireland, but I work globally. And like some of my colleagues, I support women in senior leadership roles who are challenged by their own stress and that of their team. So burnout is an issue that I support them with.
Yeah. Thanks, Kathleen. And yeah, that word burnout, I think we're going to hear a lot about that in the course of our conversation. Well, welcome, Hive. You know, what I neglected to tell you, dear listener, is that we are a group of folks that have been working together for quite a while now, coming together on a weekly basis and really, really working to make sure that we are continuing to be the best coaches that we can be for ourselves and for our clients and for each other. So it really is an honor to be able to work and share the Hive with you today. So let's get going, Hive, with our conversation here. And I want to present like a few things that we can start to chew on first. So it's kind of stunning, but it looks like 84% of leaders report their teams are experiencing burnout, to Kathleen's point, with 27% describing it as severe. Beyond that, the cost of replacing a mid-level employee is 150% of their annual salary. For executives, it's up to 400%. So we've got a big problem here. We've got when folks are experiencing too much stress and burning out and leaving an organization, it can be really expensive, both psychically and financially for the organization. So I want to start with that and ask you, what's your experience been in working with leaders as they address their own stress culture for themselves and for the organizations? And what are you seeing as a breaking point for your high performers? So Dr. Donnie, could I start with you?
Sure, Danny. So, in the organizations and the leaders that we work, we see the impact, the cost in many different areas, from decision making to problem solving to innovation. And ultimately, the impact is on disengaged and unsatisfied, unhappy employees. And when that happens, they typically talk with their feet. and they move on. Some will burn out before that, and that's a lose-lose, though a lot will just move on to other organizations. And we can look at study after study, McKinsey, Harvard Business Review, American Psychological Association. The evidence is clear. You can only kick the can on culture that is too high stress for a finite period of time.
Yeah. And folks start leaving, right? Another stunning statistic, 63% of high-performing employees are actively looking for new roles, right? You're citing burnout as the primary reason. And this was actually came from McKinsey. Yeah.
I just want to jump in, Danny, because you said high-performing employees, 63% of high-performing employees actively looking for new roles. And I think this is probably one of the substantial costs for the organizations, that people who are contributing the greatest to your bottom line, to your top line, are the ones who can leave, and then you may stay with the folks who are disengaged, who may be like quitting in place, and there is almost this invisible cost of burnout and stress.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, and you're getting me to think, and I'm hoping we can all talk about this, that there's, we're talking about the kind of stress that burns people out, but there's good stress and there's bad stress, right? Thinking about, I had a big work project that was due this weekend. I had enormous stress in getting this thing done, and my avoider saboteur was flaming on me, right? Saying I wanted to do everything except this project. But when I finally did it and did it well, there was this reward of feeling this amazing sense of accomplishment and relief. So it's an interesting thing when we put ourselves through stress to get to the reward side of it. So I'm wondering, I feel like that was bad stress when I was in the moment, but in hindsight, it really is good stress. It got me to get the work done, and it actually gave me some endorphins afterward. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about good stress and bad stress. Yeah, Mary.
Yes, from a performance standpoint, and this occurs both in the boardroom, and for me who work with athletes as well as leaders, is that it impacts from a performance standpoint how our mindset looks at it. So is it an opportunity, right? Or is it stress and we have anxiety? So understanding the difference, healthy pressure, oh, this is an opportunity. It's a challenge, right? And what leads to that is increased focus, very motivating, right? And then just like you mentioned, Danny, the feeling that came from finishing it. And it's a whole different pressure as compared to stress and anxiety, because that impacts you emotionally, physically in a negative way. So knowing how to manage healthy pressure versus destructive stress is really important.
Yeah, can I jump in there too? I'm delighted you brought the word pressure in, because I have to say I struggle a little bit with the concept of good stress. Do you know? Because pressure is needed, and the optimal amount of pressure that we know. But there's things that are happening in life today that just make the whole thing so much more challenging. And I looked at a study in Ireland, and I feel we are so influenced by the States that we're actually out of sync with the rest of Europe in this. And one of the factors that came up, which I thought was interesting, was a very small percentage of people said they had meaningful relationships at work. And it made me think about remote working, which I'm a great advocate for. And I know it can be, of benefit to the individual and the organization. But to be realistic, that there is a cost of camaraderie and really being in tune with the culture and your colleagues. So it's a little bit off what we're talking about, but it's an important thing, Any thoughts on that?
Well, I love what you're bringing up, Kathleen, around like connection can also help reduce that stress. That's what we see in our women's communities. Like just being seen and felt and heard reduces that level of stress, that cortisol that's shooting through us. If we're disconnected, we're not having these conversations, we're not feeling supported, that increases our stress. And so where can we create more communities by still actually holding that remote working, but inviting in a different perspective around the word for me, like fun, but I know that's not the specific word, but like, how do we create something that's not work focused to help reduce that stress, still create connection?
Yeah, I'm really appreciating that too, Taryn, about connection. I really think that's the antidote to stress, whether it is a personal connection, maybe a coffee chat, maybe connecting with your boss on things that aren't work topic related, because we're all seeking that. We're humans we're made for this. We're made for connection. And because it reduces that cortisol, you can have better focus, like you were saying, Mary. You can have better work-life balance, if there is such a thing. It really comes down to that nurturing our teams, ourselves as humans first, so that way we can be at our best when we're in our workplace. I mean, it seems simple. I know it's hard, and
Yeah.
it's not complicated. So I'm appreciating that.
Yeah. I think I'm listening to this and I think it's both and, because sometimes the antidote for stress is like, well, let's just have an offsite and have everyone play bowling or do something. And sometimes that can be viewed as having that human connection. But when you go back to work, you're like, okay, now that's outside and now we go back to business. And I think it's got to be both. And I recall working with a client who came to us because they said that, they say, oh, people are not resilient. Like, it's a very high pressure culture and people are not being resilient enough. So we were working on the resilience with them and like giving them tools, and we all share certain tools and approaches how to increase resilience. What's interesting, after our we worked together over a year with that team, actually it was the leadership team, and then reflecting with the CEO on that, it was interesting that he was saying that, yes, it was great you had science-based approach to dealing with stress and resiliency. And one of the most unexpected benefits of that work was that the people were built connection in the leadership team. And he said we had this safe, and he hated the word safe space because it kind of felt like, oh, it's like implied weakness, but it really was more of a space of people being open to each other. The leaders on the leadership team build those personal connections. They became accountability partners. And he said, well, now there are two leaders on my team who otherwise would be very transactional or maybe not even interacting at all. And now they are really close. And now I have two more engaged leaders on my team. So they were actually building connections, human connections, while staying focused on what work for their work related.
Yeah. Yeah, I would tell it's from kind of a clinical leadership perspective, we know that the best teams, the best organizations come together not only around technical competence, but a high level of trust with each other. And the best way of building trust, the interconnected, social, vulnerable trust, is to be in connection with each other. So, I really appreciate what we're saying here and what Cynthia, what you said, because it's not only like the nice thing to do, the kind thing to do, and we actually know from studies around what happiness is that's one of the first, right, Donnie? That's one of the pillars of happiness, is the idea of being in social with each other. Even when it doesn't come easy for us in an organization, it's important because trust is the foundation for the rest of how we come together. So we have to, right? We have to. It's an imperative to figure out ways, especially in this remote and hybrid work environment that most of us are in, how to not do exactly what we were doing before, right? And we want to be conscious of the fact that sometimes people think of this as forced fun, right? Oh, if I have to have one more birthday cake with my, right, my monthly birthday cake, right, I'm going to shoot somebody. But the truth is, even when it feels uncomfortable, when we're connecting with each other, when we're vulnerable with each other, when we're sharing with each other, we are actually contributing to our bottom lines.
Yeah. And it's also important because when we take that opportunity to connect with one another, we're learning what works for one person and what doesn't for another. There's actually a Goldilocks zone of stress. So what works for you, Danny, with that, you had this weekend and it felt great afterwards, that would not work for me. I am not a pressure prompted person, going back to Kathleen's point. So I had an executive, this was a few years ago, CEO, and he was very pressure prompted. And that worked for him, but it didn't work for his staff. And so when they wouldn't get the things that they needed to do their jobs because he was a last minute type of person, it stressed them out. And so there was a revolving door. These people didn't stay in the organization. So it goes back to that Goldilocks zone. And quick metaphor using the musical world. Stress, pressure is like a violin string. When a string is not tuned tightly enough and it's loose and floppy, you're not going to get any beautiful sound out of it. On the opposite end, when it's tuned too tightly, it's wound too tightly, the string after a while is going to snap and pop. So the Goldilocks zone, that bell curve of where we need that stress, that perfect level to be motivated to perform well, is right in the middle, whatever that middle level is for an individual person. You get that beautiful tone.
Yeah.
So it's all about balance, and we can only do that by connecting with one another.
And we can do that at different levels. And working with a CEO who had cross-functional teams, the collaboration that took place allowed for creativity and efficiencies that were learned. Developing a plan, having a vision, everybody being on board, reducing the things that cause the stress, like having a plan, having the resources needed to meet the tight deadlines, and then the teams aligning with that and being able to execute it. So it's kind of like an extension of that to the team level, to the organizational level. It works all the way around relative to connection and communication and the advantages that create high performance, creativity, and those types of things.
Yeah. Go ahead, Taryn.
Well, as Donnie was talking about the strings on the violin, the key there is the player actually has to slow down enough to tune in to what's happening with the instrument. I'm going to guess, Donnie, I am not a musician like you are, but temperature also, like humidity and other factors are going to impact the strings on that instrument, and you have to really pay attention and slow down enough to make sure you've got the tension just right. So that's the same thing around stress. Like there's going to be multiple factors that need to be considered. And if we're slowing down enough to read the room or read ourselves, read our bodies, we're going to be playing at our best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to stay in this space. I hope we can keep talking about that, because I think, ultimately it's putting lipstick on a pig, if you will, if we don't take care of some of the root causes, if we don't look at our own sense of how we manage and deal with stress, and how, I love this metaphor that we're building with the violin string. And I'm thinking, if I don't know how to play a violin, it doesn't even matter how tight that string is, right?
Yeah.
I need to know enough about myself and manage that in order to be more resilient, in order to do all these things. Kathleen.
And I'm going to jump in. I'm thinking back to a previous podcast on vulnerability in leadership. And isn't that what this is about? How many, hand over heart, I wonder how many senior leaders listening to this say they model
Yes.
this.
That's a good point.
Or are they the taught string?
Yeah.
And of course we pick that up from whoever, the top influences all the layers. So this is
Donnie's example. Yeah.
you have the statistics, and we know this to be true. And our clients who are suffering sometimes because they're under that taut string style of leadership. And it's a no-no to talk about, particularly for women. Do you know, if I am to say, okay, I'm suffering with stress, oh, there she goes again. She really shouldn't be at this level. So that has to be modeled from the top. What you
were thinking, and I'm thinking back to that particular client I was mentioning, and one of the things that I admired a lot was that the CEO of the company actually was willing to be part of this whole pilot and the part of this program and really model and do the best he could and really stay with that. And I think it made a huge impact on the team, because not only they were more likely to stay with that training, but also just being in the proximity of your senior leader who is showing up vulnerably, who is showing up as a human, and also showing the interest in the team enough to bring something like that. And like he was a brilliant, he was great in the business side, and also acknowledging that in order for us to bring business results, that we need to build resilience as humans, to build the sort of, not, I won't say personal development, but give people something that will support them as humans, as well as the professionals on the team. That really made a lot of difference. I think it's really one of the things I admired a lot about that client.
Yeah. You know, we come together as a hive because one of the things that we're all have in common is that we are PQ coaches. We are positive intelligence coaches. We work with this rubric of understanding of how to best mitigate our emotions and tap into our deeper inner wiser self. I'm thinking that fits in really nicely here too. I'm wondering, Taryn, could I ask you, you know, in PQ, in positive intelligence, what do we do with dealing with stress?
Well, we pause when we notice our bodies are in that reactivity mode. We take the time to pause and get grounded. I know that sounds like a kind of a woo-woo word, but it's like it's getting recentered. It's coming back to like, what do I need right now? So I'm performing at my best. If we're coming from stress, reactivity, it's our amygdala. We're getting hijacked. We're not making our best decisions. We are reactive versus creative. We're in this zone of below the line responsiveness versus above the line creativity and compassion and empathy. So we're not at our performing at our best. Just like the musicians that we were talking about earlier, if we're not given the time to slow down and tune our instruments, we're not able to have the best orchestra, the best performance of the night. We have to slow down. We have to pause.
The power of the pause. Wonderful. Yeah, that was one of the things. If you've been listening to our podcast, you know that normally we start off with grounding ourselves together and do some PQ reps. And I completely forgot to do that at the beginning. But to Taryn's point, it's important to think about how, if we're building up our own sense, our own strengths and dealing with stress and pressure, what is it that you are doing for yourself? And we are all big advocates for slowing down, as Taryn said, slowing down, pausing, taking stock, taking a break, and then coming back to that, to disengage the amygdala, to disengage the limbic part of our brain and re-engage the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brains.
And we also have the evidence, Danny, don't we, from the positive intelligence world of the impact that bringing that operating system into the workplace, like you did, Sveta, like many of us have, that has increased productivity, decreased stress, so many positives. So it's bigger even than our experience.
Yeah,
It's the thousands of PQ coaches around the world who are making that impact.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, so we're getting close to time here. I'm wondering if we would just do a quick round robin here and say, what is something that you want to share with our listening and viewing audience about stress in terms of your own expertise and all your work with your clients? What's a tip, a hack, something that they can think about as we're closing this podcast? So who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Kathleen.
Okay, I'm going to thank Donnie for the Goldilocks. And I would have that image and that knowledge, but I hadn't thought of it that way. And we operate in this one size fits all world, and certainly in business. And I think that is one of the primary mistakes that senior leaders and leaders in general can make, if they think, and then the tendency to think what works for me works for everybody else. So to slow down and get to know people as individuals, and you'll get so much more out of them.
Yeah, that's the trust builds, and yeah, really good. Yes,
Yeah, what I want to say is that working with organizations, stress, of course, is unavoidable. It's nice to consider reducing it, but the truth of the matter is it's always will be stress. And I think what leaders could do, what will help them, are the two things. We talked about connection. I think it's important because stress, and I like how we talked about stress versus challenge. Stress is just as body respond to something challenging. Connection, building human connection is very important. And another thing, I think we didn't bring it up very deeply, but helping people connect to the purpose of this activity that causes stress, and help them connect the purpose, their personal purpose, the purpose of the organization. So is it why? So what is the, if the cost of it is high as it creates stress, but why are you doing this? Why do you choose to do this? So I think these are two things are important.
Thanks, Sveta. How about you, Cynthia?
Yeah, that really resonates with me too, Sveta. I was thinking about what matters most and how to connect on that. It's really just a simple question too. So it doesn't have to be very complicated. I notice when my husband, who works with his managers, we share a lot about what's going on with his work because he works in a corporation, and just noticing the conversation and how it goes when they talk about things that truly matter about either their project or even just personal things like, hey, what's showing up for you? What matters most about XYZ? Like, I know you were doing this and you were doing that. And just that small personal connection can really just allow your creativity to be unlocked, your purpose, your passion, why you want to do that project, whatever it is. And it's just a simple way to segue from one thing to another because it does build that trust.
Absolutely.
It does build that, like, oh, this is where I fit. People
Yeah.
care about me.
Yes.
It doesn't have to take a long time. That's what I'm really thinking about too. Some leaders think it's going to take a long time to do these things.
Yeah.
Love that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Taryn.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and continue on what Cynthia was saying. What I'm hearing is leaders also have influence. And by showing up and having some humanity, some personal engagement conversations, there's more connection. And there's also that ability to influence the conversation around, I'm going to take a moment to pause here. Just like the conductor of an orchestra, they're making sure all those instruments are in tune. That it's up to them when that concert starts. And so there's this influence of, I'm going to take a moment to pause and check my own stress level, because there's that ripple effect out to the rest of the group. So I would offer up, like, how are leaders themselves taking care of their own stress? Because it's going to come out one way or the other. It can be a positive reaction or a negative one.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
I'd like to add to that it can be positive or negative. And then when we do the pause, it can also be an opportunity, because if it is negative and there is a lot of stress, pause and take a look at that. Are you working on your most important things first? Just looking at all the different things that cause the stress and where's the opportunity in this, right? It could be that you make different decisions at a higher level in relation to lots of different decision points, timelines, who does what, those types of big decisions. You can monitor that. It can be an opportunity, and that's a mindset. And then determining what works so it can repeat. And you can minimize the stress and see it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Before I say it again, this Hive is brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, Mary, that was awesome. And Dr. Donnie, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I just want to piggyback on Mary's, because I love how we can take this now to the land of opportunity.
Yep.
And one of the things that I think makes us all special is that we do not have a cookie cutter approach. We know that everyone's different, that we need to customize. And now that we're post-pandemic, one thing that we learned, and this is a gift, I really believe this is a gift, is workers are demanding a culture that focuses on their well-being. More than 80% are looking for a workplace that prioritizes their well-being. A happy and engaged and satisfied worker is a higher performing worker. And so that's our opportunity here. Let's go to these leaders and these teams. Let's lead by example. Let's make a difference in the world and have more innovation and creativity as a result.
That's right.
Yes,
Awesome.
to that.
Yes, exactly. Great. Well, thank you, Hive. There's still so much more to talk about this. I'm buzzing with excitement. Did you catch that? but we've got some sweet honey that came from this. So thank you, Hive. It's a great opportunity. Dear listener, dear viewer, thank you for joining us on our Best Boss Podcast, Hive Edition. We look forward to seeing you on our next one. Please feel free to contact any or all of us if we can help you with managing your own stress and pressure, much less your teams and your organizations. We would love to help you with that. Thank you so much, Hive. Thank you, listener. We'll see you next time. This is Danny
Thank you.
Ceballos,
All right, thank you, Danny.
Podcast. You're welcome. Bye now.
Bye.